US President Donald Trump's campaign has caused ripples across national and global policy. But one element that stands out is tariffs. The 45th and now 47th President of the United States has a history of waging trade wars in his first term. Before being elected in 2024, Trump made it clear he will pursue what was left undone in 2020. Among his many MAGA promises, he threatened tariffs on neighbors Canada and Mexico.
If you don't make your product here, then you will have to pay a tariff, a very substantial tariff, when you send your product into the United States. And by the way, for years they knocked the word tariff, properly used, is a beautiful word.
His reasons? Illegal immigration, China supplying the deadly and addictive fentanyl drug through borders and getting more American jobs. Even before Trump took office, the constant threat of a tariff war with Canada led to high-profile resignations in the neighboring nation. Over subsidies to Canada, Trump coined another threat that Canada become US's 51st state and Trudeau become Governor Trudeau. In December 2024, Canada PM Justin Trudeau's close aide and Finance Minister Chrystia Freeland resigned hours before the fall economic statement. And on January 6, exactly 2 weeks before President Trump's swearing in, Prime Minister Justin Trudeau resigned.
I intend to resign as party leader, as Prime Minister, after the party selects its next leader.
Despite the Trudeau cabinet's constant negotiations with the Trump cabinet and a surprise visit of a premier to Mar-a-Lago, the tariffs came through on February 1, 2025. Now here's the catch. Even as tariffs stand deferred till March 4, the Canadian Parliament also stands suspended till March 24. But what lies ahead for US-Canada trade? For this, we need to understand how deep the trade goes. Let's talk numbers. Canada was a British territory in 1855 when it first began trade with the United States. But it was only in 1989 the US-Canada trade started being governed by a trade agreement, the US-Canada Free Trade Agreement. This was replaced by the 1994 North American Free Trade Agreement, NAFTA. In 2020, under Trump's first administration, the US signed a pact with Mexico and Canada, the USMCA. Canada and the United States share about $1.6 trillion in annual trade, as per news agency Reuters. In 2023, Canada was the third largest exporter to the US at $413 billion. According to Statistics Canada data for 2024, Canada exported 76% of its goods to the US. It also imported half of its goods from the United States. America's northern neighbor is the largest supplier of US energy imports, including crude oil, natural gas, and electricity. The country's share of US crude oil imports by quantity increased from 38%, which is 1.2 billion barrels in 2014, to 63%, that is 1.48 billion barrels in 2024. The top export product was crude petroleum at $97.1 billion. Next in line were cars at $36 billion and petroleum gas at $14.3 billion. In terms of service, Canada's exports amounted to $25.5 billion. Computer and information services topped the charts, with transportation and financial services following it. US, on the other hand, exported $269 billion worth of goods to Canada in 2023, with delivery trucks being the top export. US also exports travel, financial services, and other business services to Canada. In November 2024, Canada recorded a positive trade balance of $13.5 billion. However, Canadian exports have decreased by 5.47%, down $1.85 billion between 2023 and 24. In terms of state-wise division, Canadian exports were majorly from Ontario, followed by Alberta, Quebec, British Columbia, and Saskatchewan. The current and potential scope of trade discussions between US and Canada include Canadian legislation regarding digital services providers and online content. It also includes automotive issues and potential cooperation in critical minerals. US access to Canada's dairy market and Canada's softwood lumber industry will also remain in focus. This is not the first time Trump has locked horns with Canada on free trade. In 2016, Trump promised to cancel the North American Free Trade Agreement (NAFTA). This was replaced by the 2020 United States-Mexico-Canada Agreement (USMCA). This will be headed for review in 2026. In his second term, Trump has announced 25% tariffs on Canadian imports, with 10% on Canadian energy. This came into force through an executive order on February 1, but was quickly deferred to March 4. On February 10 and 11, Trump removed exemptions on steel and aluminum tariffs for all countries. This would mean an additional 25% tariff on Canadian steel and aluminum imports to the United States from March 12, 2025. The Canadian government stated it would respond immediately to potential US tariffs.
Canada will be responding to the US trade action with 25% tariffs against $155 billion worth of American goods.
The reciprocal 25% tariffs will be levied on about $22 billion worth of US imports. Canada also plans additional tariffs on $92 billion worth of US imports. Trudeau has publicly stated that Canada is also considering non-tariff measures related to critical minerals, energy, and other areas.
We may have short-term some little pain, and people understand that, but long-term, the United States has been ripped off by virtually every country in the world. We have deficits with almost every country. Fentanyl has killed this year at least 200,000 people. It's pouring in from China through Mexico and Canada, and they've got to stop it. And if they don't stop it, the tariffs are going to get worse. You know, they don't pay very much for military, and the reason they don't pay much is they assume that we're going to protect them. That's not an assumption they can make.
Trump uses tariffs as a negotiating tool. Listen to Senator Tuberville explain this.
President Trump's view on tariffs, both a negotiating tool to get other countries to do a few things that we ask them to do, a way to boost American manufacturing and put American workers and businesses first, not last.
Trump's way of negotiation is first introduce tariffs and then make a deal. Even during his first term, he threatened Canada-Mexico with tariffs to cancel the NAFTA deal and negotiate a new one. See, and you'll know what Trump really wants.
By the way, without tariffs, we wouldn't be talking about a deal. Just for those babies out there that keep talking about tariffs. That includes Congress. Oh, please don't charge tariffs. Without tariffs, we wouldn't be standing here. I can tell you Bob and all of these folks would not be standing here right now. And we're totally prepared to do that if they don't negotiate.
Trudeau's former finance minister and now a Liberal candidate for Prime Minister, Chrystia Freeland, has called for a 100% tariff on Teslas and targets specific Trump constituencies.
I left Trudeau's cabinet because I know what we need to do to win that fight again. Donald Trump and his billionaire buddies think they can push us around. Trump thinks we're for sale, but he can take what isn't his. I'm not gonna let him.
Mark Carney, Trudeau's once economic advisor and now a Liberal PM candidate, has taken a more conscious approach.
That my focus has majored on what we should do here in Canada to strengthen our economy, irrespective of what the Americans take.
Conservative leader and Prime Ministerial candidate Pierre Poilievre has responded sharply to the Trump tariff threat.
There is no justification whatsoever for these tariffs or this treatment. Canada will never be the 51st state. We are an independent, proud, and strong nation. Even if you believe in tariffs, How is it possible to put a 25% tariff on Canada and only a 10% tariff on China?
NDP leader and former Trudeau ally Jagmeet Singh also said,
just the threat of these tariffs have already meant job losses in Canada. We've seen companies cut jobs because of the threats. So people are deeply worried. And so we know a couple things. We know that Donald Trump wants Canada as the 51st state.
Ontario Premier Doug Ford has taken a tough stance on cutting energy when threats have deepened.
Depending how far this goes, we will go to the extent of cutting off their energy, going down to Michigan, going down to New York State and over to Wisconsin. I don't want this to happen, but my number one job is to protect Ontario.
He also led a consortium of premiers to put forth an action plan.
As premiers, we reached consensus on a number of key items.
One premier was absent from these negotiations, Alberta's Danielle Smith.
Under no circumstances will Alberta agree to cut off oil and gas exports. We're investing $29 million to create a new unit. We're accelerating our plan, but that is our approach, is one of diplomacy, not threats.
Her stance of negotiation comes from the US being Alberta's biggest customer for exports and oil and gas dominating bilateral trade. Smith was also in the news for meeting Trump at Mar-a-Lago in an attempt to soften the blow and avoid tariffs. Trump's tariff threat may pave the way for a new deal with its two neighbors, Mexico and Canada, as early as March 2025. Canadian leaders, including Trudeau and Jagmeet Singh, have not ruled out the significance of Trump's 51st state drive. They understand that this will be an opportunity for the US to have access to its minerals, industry, and energy. Trump's tough negotiation style led to USMCA having stricter rules on automobile manufacturing, enhanced labor standards, and stronger intellectual property protections. The New Deal can be more America-focused. Even though it remains to be seen what happens to the tariffs after March 4, Trump is surely getting a confident shot at making America great again. In the coming months, we will get to know whether Trump's Canada 51st state drive was a real thing or just a pressure tactic to get more leverage over Canadian leadership. While new faces to replace Trudeau's leadership in Canada are getting a chance to forward their nationalistic style of leadership. Canada goes to elections in October 2025. And after Trudeau stepped aside, Trump's tariff threats have become a major election issue to save not just Canadian jobs and economy, but also Canada's autonomy to protect it from foreign threats. That's all from us from the Economic Times. Stay tuned and keep watching to know all that's going on in the world.